Hello and welcome back to another episode of From College to Combine. As always, I am Michael Sicoli, joined here with Riley Millette. How are you doing today, Riley? You look as young as I do today.
I think I'm going to start doing like a Collinsworth slide with the microphone, like into the frame.
I don't think you're that big, though.
To pick it up this time.
I don't know if you're that big time to pull off a Collinsworth type of slide.
People know this. I mean, like if this were the show logo instead of that helmet, people would know.
Yeah, they would, but unfortunately it's not. But what really matters today is that we have a really great show lined up. Last week we teased to it. This week we're going to get into the bust of the week, and we're not even going to drag on too long. We're just going to go through a few headlines, and we're going to go straight into it. Those players that will tank your roster. But before I do that, I want to start off and give a shout out to For Frequency's Sake, where you're watching right now. Great place to subscribe and follow all their content, their video, amazing podcast content, as well as IDP Guys. Same thing on the YouTube front there. You might be watching that here as well. Subscribe there. Check out IDP Guys, the website, because there's a ton of amazing content. There are Discord channels for subscribers. And the IDP draft kit just dropped in, which if you're scared to have IDP, it's a heck of a way to get into it. And, of course, the Rookie Mag, which I've been talking about forever, and my own newsletter, which we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to headlines. Let's get right into it, right? Let's just jump. You know, it's a Wednesday. We're in June. Let's go crazy. I think it's the second Wednesday of June. I feel pumped up right now. Maybe it's because, I don't know, we got NBA Finals later. It's the summer. I don't know. You kick us off. We had the same headline we wanted to start with, I think.
All right. Yeah, Saquon Barkley. His knee is feeling good. He's calling out the haters and saying, if you're down on me, then stay on that side when I come back and I run all over your league or something like that. It's heartwarming for me, you know. I just wish nothing for the best for this young dude who's had a rough go of it in the last couple of years in terms of injuries, and for a player who, like, we thought was quite literally the next Barry Sanders, I want nothing more than to see him be what he was during his rookie year.
So he's going off the board around that like RB17 range. So it's the perfect dead zone right now with Saquon Barkley. And I think that will go up a little bit closer to the RB12 than RB20. But it's the perfect dead zone of risk reward. If you start off going heavy wide receiver, heavy tight end, you go with that zero RB approach. Saquon Barkley, you could be there in that third, fourth round. And I won't lie. That's going to be a strategy I will be all about. I will be all about that strategy of starting off with a Cooper Kupp, then taking my Travis Kelce, and then taking Saquon Barkley, or taking another wide receiver and then Saquon, depending on where your ADP is falling around, or Saquon and then DJ Moore or someone like that. Like, you can get an incredible start with how Saquon's injury is going to be factored in. And I don't think he can rise that high. Like, I don't, even when August comes around, he could be starting the preseason. I don't see a world he gets drafted inside the top 12.
No way.
And at that point, the discount is going to be just tremendous. So I'm in on Saquon Barkley, especially at price. I think we're both in on that because we are all about the Saquon Barkley train here. We also have been watching some Penn State highlights over the offseason just to feel good about it, because ultimately that is some of the best that is some of the best college film I've ever watched in my life. I don't know when I'll watch better ones. And I say that watching the Jamar Chases of the world and watching our Javonte Williams of the world, they don't hold a candle to Saquon Barkley.
No, they don't.
Your eyes just shut up me going Jamar Chase to Javonte Williams, but
Lordy.
Fun tape. Either way, we can jump into our next piece of news. We'll talk about Sammy Watkins because it's the summer. Matt LaFleur came out and said that Sammy Watkins will be a big part of the offense. This comes about a week or so after him saying that he wished everyone was at OTA, Sammy Watkins being someone that avoided going to the voluntary OTAs for reasons unknown. Maybe he's too big time. Maybe he's succeeded too much to go to the Green Bay Packers OTAs. Or maybe he just didn't want to catch those off-target throws by Jordan Love, which, honestly, who can blame him? So, I want to use this opportunity. I talked about Lazard last week with the Sleeper Show. Be sure to check that out if you missed it. Who do you think is leading this? Like, what percent chance do you give Sammy Watkins to be a fantasy-relevant name 30% of the time?
Fantasy relevant, meaning he's in the top 36 wide receivers.
The top 30 on a week. Maybe you can flex him at top 30.
I think he'll finish there on 40% of his games.
Oh my goodness. What?
Yeah.
We are very far off.
Let's see. A wide receiver room featuring Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers. Those are the returners from last year. They added Christian Watson. And Aaron Jones is going to get a decent amount of targets from the backfield. And then there's Robert Tonyan.
And I think Sammy Watkins Romeo Dubes as well. The draft for Romeo Dubes as well.
Okay, whatever.
Randall Cobb.
I think Sammy Watkins could beat out half of those names. And working with the back-to-back MVP, which is the only reason I'm saying this, I think maybe he's a worthwhile flex sometimes. Not a guy I'm excited to flex, but if in a pinch I had to put him there and he gave me 7-8 points, I'd be like, all right, Sammy Watkins, thank you. I'm moving on to next week where now DeAndre Hopkins is back from his suspension and I can play him instead. That's how I do Watkins.
If you're saying anywhere near 40%, right? 40% would be basically 8 startable games on the year, which is probably the end of the year. He probably ends the year as like the wide receiver 28, like that. So if you believe that, then you're drafting him every single week or you're drafting him in every single league because he's going next to undrafted. See, I, on the other hand, was much closer to the 10% range. I see him much closer to being cut than he is to being fantasy relevant because I do project Christian Watson ahead of him. I project Allen Lazard. I project Tonyan. I project Aaron Jones. And we sometimes struggle to see the number 2 emerge in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. And now this is a team that we both project, I'm sure, to run a lot more than they have in years past. You can't lose Davonte Adams and keep what you were doing. So with that in mind, I think Sammy Watkins would have to be a mega touchdown guy, and he's just never been that, And as for MVP quarterback, Sammy Watkins has played with his fair share.
Yeah, that's true. But now he's playing with the 2 years in a row the most efficient quarterback in terms of throwing touchdowns and red zone passing. I'm expecting a little bit of positive touchdown regression to come his way, and I'm not excited to play him. I'm not like sitting in the last round of every draft saying, all right, this is the Sammy Watkins pick. I'll take that case by case, but he's a nice little DFS play that I'll play him sometimes. If I have him like in a dynasty, like deep on my bench, I guess that's not the worst thing to fill in when I have injuries, but I'm not saying Sammy Watkins. I don't think he's not going to make the roster. I think he will make the roster.
I mean, I think it'll be more. I think it's difficult for him not to be honest, with the depth of that. But yeah, I mean, if you're higher than I am, you should be going out and getting him in every league you can. I think Mr. Jared Yeager has him in our league probably. So either way, we're gonna jump to our final piece of news. It's something we've been kind of avoiding talking about because it's kind of been a little bit murky. But at this point, I think we've kind of reached ahead with it, with the Desean Watson situation in Cleveland. And I'll just come out and say the scumbag that he is, with the 24th accusation that came out this past week, very detailed response. And obviously, this is the type of situation. Drew Davenport is a fantastic follow on Twitter if you want to follow a fantasy football lawyer type of person for that. He's been amazing at breaking this down. But I can tell you from this that this situation is not a law situation for the NFL. They don't need a conviction. They don't need a trial. They don't need anything. And ultimately, that doesn't even matter to them. What matters to the NFL is appearance. Everything is PR. This is business. So if they give a pass on this, they have every right. They could give a pass on it, but the PR will be a nightmare. I am at the point where I'm expecting and projecting a full year suspension for Desean Watson with the possibility that he will have to appeal to get back in the league. I think that is a possible thing. At the minimum, I'm saying a year. And I think with all the information coming out, I think we're still going to be waiting not much longer to get a ruling because apparently they were close, and I imagine they still heard of this 24th before we did. But Riley, I'm curious on what you're expecting for the Desean Watson suspension because I think we're all locked in that that's coming, and how long you think it's going to be and what you're going to do with the Browns pieces.
My dad just asked me like 20 minutes ago what Baker Mayfield is up to. And I said, oh, he was excused from mandatory camp because he doesn't want to be there and he wants to get traded. And my dad goes, what's taking so long? And it's probably because there's a mega suspension coming for Desean Watson, and they're gonna have to talk Baker Mayfield into playing again. So at this point, I'm treating every Browns weapon as if Baker Mayfield is their quarterback for the whole year. I'm not even giving Desean Watson a second thought in my head fantasy wise. Just in terms of the case, it came out like maybe 20 minutes ago that the Texans were added as a defendant to the lawsuit because they supplied Desean Watson with private hotel rooms and non-disclosure agreements for all the massage therapists that he had meetings with in hotel rooms. So that's another PR disaster coming for the Texans, and they're probably not. I mean, maybe they'll have if they'll be forfeiting some draft picks or things like that. That's kind of seeing way down in the future for when the investigation from the NFL is over. But just in terms of the Browns fantasy-wise, Baker Mayfield is their quarterback until further notice.
I did ship out, as Riley knows, because in my Dynasty League, I did ship out Nick Chubb in my Dynasty League this factored in for me. And listen, Nick Chubb, the offense I think the offense could be worse than it was last year because I don't see a world Baker Mayfield suits up. I'm surprised that you do, to be honest, because I think they signed Jacoby Brissett to be their backup. Mayfield is not going to OTAs because he does not want to be on that team. And also to point out that if Baker Mayfield was cut and he joins the Panthers, he'll play the Browns in week 1. But regardless, I think this is a Jacoby Brissett year. I'm worried about all pieces involved. I think it's going to be an incredibly up and down year for Amari Cooper, who, if he goes late enough in drafts with Brissett, maybe I'm interested. But who knows? And as for the running situation, Nick Chubb is going to see the most defenders in the box that he's ever seen in his career. And that is not good. That is not good. And there's a guy that doesn't catch passes and a guy that is an unbelievably talented runner, but he will be going on age 27. And that is something that is an age you start getting a little bit worried about when you get runners that cannot catch the ball or will not be asked to catch the ball. And so Nick Chubb, to me, is getting very close to that sell territory. I did it and flipped. I sold him plus an early 23 second, essentially, for the Minnesota backfield. I also included Rashad Penny in there, who I'm equally out on for the same reasons of I'm done with Seattle. But ultimately, my final thoughts on it is that we should just cut Cleveland and Houston out of the NFL, settle with 30 teams. It's a nice round number, and build it from there. Right? I mean, who would miss them? Who would miss them? The Browns aren't winning the AFC North. The Texans aren't going to win 3 games. So, like, what? Who? You know, like, why bother? You know, why bother? But either way, we can move on to our main part of the show, our favorite part of the show, because I'm sick of talking about someone like Desean Watson. We're going to talk about busts. The people that you're drafting high, low, in the middle, doesn't matter. They're going to tank your roster because you're going to hold out for them. You're going to invest in them, and they're not going to pan out. Before we get into that, I want to quickly talk about the Idp Guys Newsletter. That's something I headed up last week. We sent our second one out this morning. Comes out every single Wednesday. Check out my Twitter at Michael__Sicoli and check out the pinned tweet on top to subscribe to that. And you can also obviously subscribe on the IDP Guys website, get on the mailing list, and it's awesome IDP content getting sent out every single Wednesday morning. I enjoy it. I think Riley kind of enjoys it, but I don't know. I can never get a read on that guy. Yeah, no, terrible. I don't want to look at him, honestly. But let's get into the bus for 2022. Riley, you know what? I always start this off. Riley, you kick us off.
I was waiting for you to ask me that. I truly was.
Yeah, I'm surprised because I decided that last minute. Go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a guy who's this conversation is a bit more relevant in Superflex. I had a lot of trouble going through the top 12, 15 quarterbacks and trying to find someone who I didn't think would live up to their draft status. I had Lamar Jackson in there, who was being drafted as the QB4, but after thinking about it, I didn't like calling for less than that because obviously due to his rushing floor, he could so easily hit that. But I'm gonna call on Justin Fields, who's being drafted as the QB20, to bust almost entirely because of how little I believe in the Browns and what they've done to their wide receiver room this offseason. Losing Allen Robinson, they brought in Byron Pringle, they drafted Velus Jones. They brought in a couple other names who are just not worth my time. And even though we saw a couple small flashes from Justin Fields, he certainly has the traits. It wasn't consistent enough for me to bank on a quarterback in a bad system who is worth me drafting as my QB2 in a super flex, because that's what a QB20 is. You take, if say you're like in a super flex redraft and you take Joe Burrow in the first round, and it comes to round 3 or 4, and you're looking at guys like Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, who are drafted in that range. And you could say the same thing about Trevor Lawrence, but I'll say Justin Fields because I think Trevor Lawrence is a better player who has better weapons around him and a better head coach. So I'm not really going anywhere near Justin Fields. Maybe a few years down the line when their offense is a bit more developed and they have a better coaching situation, I'll believe in the talent. But for redraft right now, I don't want anything to do with him because of the offense.
It's totally fair because the Bears have surrounded him with no talent. It's Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, who I like. I like those two, but that's it. Now, I'm holding out some hope for Justin Fields because I think Luke Getsy, new offensive coordinator, is going to get him on the move. And that's something that Nagy totally failed to do. And I think we could see Justin Fields flirt with 400 rushing yards. And if he does that, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I talked about quarterback rushing yards, that's a threshold that can really push you up, 400 rushing yards. But that's a high bar. That's what you'll have to do because I agree with you. The passing attack's just not going to be developed. I'll move on to my QB bust, and it's a guy I have been cherishing. I've been touting. I love this guy. I love Dak Prescott. I just don't think he's going to at all live up to ADP, and we have to remember that losing Amari Cooper is a big deal. Amari Cooper is a good player. He's always been a good player, and now he's disappeared. So that whole aspect of the offense is gone. That's one part. The other part is that Dak Prescott threw touchdowns at 6.2% of his passes last year. League average was around 4.5. Dak Prescott hovers around 4.8 to 5. So that number is going to drop. That number will drop. You don't lose pieces and then get better. So if there's going to be less touchdowns and then less passing yards, potentially, because he also threw the most amount of passing attempts in his career, which again, when you lose weapons, you tend to regress the entire offense and balance out, which Mike McCarthy has done before. So I think that's what we're going to see here. It's just not boding up well for a QB7 price. And that's really what I have a problem with. Like, Riley, would you rather, right? I'm going to throw out some names here. I want you to know who would you rather take. Would you rather Dak Prescott, and he's going at 61 overall, according to Fantasy Pros, which is about, what's that? What's my math? In the 5th round. You're taking Dak Prescott in the 5th round. Would you rather him, or would you rather take a chance on either of the Broncos wide receivers?
Oh, give me the receipt 100. Because I like Cortland a lot, and Jerry Jeudy is just very talented.
Yeah, and then you factor in
even outside their specific names, just because I like both of those names, I get like what you're going for, like guys with that upside that are drafted in that area. I'll 100% take the position player.
Yeah, and I'll take the Darnell Mooney that goes after him, the Brandon Cooks that goes after him, the Allen Robinson that goes after him. And then obviously something I think Riley and I both share the belief of is that these guys, Dak Prescott doesn't have a ceiling to me because he also ran 150 yards last year in 16 games. He only had 150 rushing yards. Dak's ceiling is non-existent. And when you're investing a top pick at quarterback and avoiding investing in that wide receiver, the Brandon Cooks, the Allen Robinsons, the guys that will actually help your team, you need upside. Because otherwise you can just wait. We can wait and take any of the guys in the double-digit rounds. If you're even in Superflex, he might be steady, but he doesn't have the ceiling that I want relative to the investment you have to put in him. That's kind of my belief on Dak Prescott. I love him. I still like CeeDee Lamb. I can still like Dalton Schultz, but I don't think the touchdowns and the efficiency or the rushing yards are going to be there to live up to a QB7 6th round price tag. I wouldn't take him later than the 9th.
Yeah, and just in the interest of not doubling up and having the same pick, I would have picked him. I went with Justin Fields just so we can talk about different guys. But QB7 is really rich for someone who A, we're expecting them to run the ball a lot because they have 2 really good running backs, and B, lost Amari Cooper.
Yep. Go on with your bust running back, Mr. Millett.
This one's going to hurt. This one's going to hurt me, and it's going to hurt you.
Oh, boy.
So Javonte Williams is being drafted as the running back 8 right now. Running back 8. Okay, let me read you his touches for last year. It was at the end of the year when he had kind of broken out, but he was still splitting carries with Melvin Gordon. He had 15 carries, 7, 14, 12 in the last 5 weeks of the season. Melvin Gordon in that time frame was still getting 24, 15, 7, 10, 12 carries. Melvin Gordon they brought back. So they're still going to be splitting work. Maybe if we're looking at Javonte Williams through rose-tinted glasses, he's getting 65% of the work if everything really goes right and they kind of commit to him. But even then, I don't really see that being the case. I see max 60% of the work going to Javonte, and it's going to end up being near an even split. So I think just based on the talent of Javonte Williams, he could hit RB8 on the season. I think that's his total ceiling. If touchdowns go his way, if usage goes his way, if he continues to work on how he's being used as a receiver, which he had one game where he had 9 targets, and then in the last 5 weeks, he had 2 targets, 4, 2, 1, 2. So something's going to have to change in order for him to hit RB8 in terms of targets. I don't see that happening. I think Javonte Williams' floor is the RB 17, 18 range. I'll bank on him finishing around 13 or 14. I'm definitely not drafting him at RB8.
And as anyone who follows this show knows, I love Javonte Williams to death, as I mentioned at the top of this show. But I tend to agree that barring injuries to Melvin Gordon, there won't be enough receptions. He caught a few last year. He caught I think it was around 40 to 44 balls. But that's about as much as you can ask from him. Because he's good. He's fine at it. He's got soft hands. Man's good. But Melvin Gordon can do that too. And Melvin Gordon took goal line touches as well. People forget that already. But Melvin Gordon's going to have a very similar role in this offense. Expecting him to take a total backup role is just hopeful thinking. And if he's in a split time field, you can kind of compare his ceiling to around, and this is high praise, but his ceiling compared to Nick Chubb, as I mentioned before, that RB8 ceiling, where that tends to be the highest that Nick Chubb finishes because he doesn't catch passes well enough. And that's, he splits goal line work. And I think that's a fair expectation to levy on Javonte Williams in what should be a high-scoring offense. So it will come down to touchdowns. If he can get 8 to 10 touchdowns and he secures that goal line work away from MG3, I'm interested. But it'll take a lot. And I'm not ruling off drafting him on my own teams either because I just love him that much. But we'll see how my projections bear out as the summer goes along. I'll move on to my running back. That's going to double down on last week's sleeper. Last week's sleeper being Rachaad White. This week's bust being Leonard Fournette. Being drafted as an RB1 at the RB12, I don't think Leonard Fournette will be returning value. I view him very similarly to James Conner, a guy that's going at RB17. I'm not sure why he's going further behind Leonard Fournette because the situations are close to identical, with one exception. The exception being that the Cardinals added Darren Williams and the Bucs added Rachaad White. One of those is really talented, and the other one's a fine backup. James Conner is a good player. This is not even about James Conner, but this is about Leonard Fournette. And Leonard Fournette is going to lose a good amount of receiving work. Riley, I'm working on this statistic. It's going to go. I'm going to tweet it out probably tomorrow-ish. I'm still working on it, but I did it for Leonard Fournette. How much of Leonard Fournette's fantasy production last season came courtesy of receiving work percentage?
Receiving work, counting receptions and receiving yards?
Receiving yards, receptions, and receiving touchdowns in PPR formats.
I know he caught 85 balls or something totally stupid. So
it was a bit under that, but yeah, it was a high amount. It's like 70.
Let's say, I would say 35%. I don't really have a good basis for this, but that feels like about right.
Well, I'll give you a reference as well, and then I'll say it as well. So of the RB1s, this is again a teaser for tomorrow. This is why you tune into the show. But Jonathan Taylor, 23.5%. Najee Harris, 46%. Austin Eckler, a pass catching specialist, right, 53%. All those guys, there's no threat to their workload in terms of receiving ability. Isaiah Spiller's not touching it. The Pittsburgh Steelers have no backup running back, and I don't get it. and Jonathan Taylor didn't rely on it. James Conner, a guy who was peppered with targets, right? 30 and 5.9%. Leonard Fournette, 49% of his production came through the air. Now that is going to drop with Rachaad White. The Bucs have been looking for someone to take that third down role. They don't want it to be Leonard Fournette because they tried to get James White. They brought in Gio Bernard. They tried to get pass catching specialists, and they finally got someone who can actually run the ball well and catch the ball well in Rachaad White, and he's going to eat into that load, and it's just not going to work. Leonard Fournette has also missed time in each and every one of his seasons. He's going on his age 27. Doesn't tend to get better in that direction. I'm pretty hands off of Leonard Fournette at a top 15 price. I get why people are doing it because he was very good for fantasy teams last year. He was good for the Bucs last year. He also showed up to camp overweight. I'm not overreacting to that, but that is something else. That's another nail, But I don't get the cost relative to the serious red flags and what the team has shown that they want to do.
Yeah, and like you said, like the difference between Darren Williams and Rachaad White. Darren Williams was a May free agency signing. Rachaad White was a third-round draft pick, right? Third or fourth?
Third. Day 2 capital.
That's a lot. That's a heavy capital to invest in someone that, supposedly to the naked eye, you would as a role that they have filled, but there's one reason that they would take him that early.
It's to use him. Mm-hmm. Go on, Riley.
So let's talk about wide receivers. All right. And this is another one that might hurt you, but I think you've come to terms with it at this point in this guy's career. Terry McLaurin is being drafted as the wide receiver 17 right now. Wide receiver 17, he's being drafted. Let me. We've talked about where he's finished in his career on this show before, but I think it's worth repeating. In his 3 years in the league, he's finished in PPR as the wide receiver 29, 20, and 25. So never finished inside the top 20. And now all of a sudden we want to draft him inside the top 20 because of Carson Wentz, even though Carson Wentz has not really supported a wide receiver like that throughout his entire career. Terry McLaurin is very talented. I just need to be proven wrong on his situation with a quarterback who can consistently deliver on in terms of fantasy and real life production without having total Carson Wentz weeks where he turns the ball over 4 times and the Commanders defense is on the field for 70% of the game, and as a result Terry McLaurin only has 4 targets. I mean, those games are going to come and they're going to severely hurt you. And even though Terry McLaurin had some really big bust games last year where he scored, I think, in the 30s, I mean, he had a 20-point game here, 20-point, 25 points, 23. So he had some decent games, but, like with Carson Wentz, maybe his ceiling goes up a little bit and he'll have games that'll help you. But at the end of the day, it won't be enough to warrant him being drafted at wide receiver 17.
I disagree in terms of one thing.
Beautiful.
I don't think he's going to totally bust. I don't. I think this is about where he's going to finish, around the wide receiver 17. And I can understand that being a bust because you're drafting him to me, it's very close to drafting him at a ceiling. I don't think this is a ceiling. I think his ceiling is still that back end wide receiver 1. I don't project that, but I think that's in the realm of possibilities. So I'm pretty hands off as well. We've talked about it all off season of we want him to be more than he is. He's a very talented player, but the team has failed to surround him with any sort of upside. I don't think Jahan Dawson is going to factor in. I'm not factoring in Logan Thomas, and therefore Terry McLaurin should command a heavy workload, and we saw what Michael Pittman could do, which was the wide receiver 16, 17. So I think that's more or less what we can expect about finishing where he's drafted, which I can understand not living up to expectations, but yeah, it's no fun. It's no fun being a Terry McLaurin owner. It's not anymore. The dynasty value has been all over the place. I
do think Jahan Dawson will factor in. Let's let Terry McLaurin's workload after the bye week in week 9. In terms of targets, he had 8, 7, 7, 5, 3, 4, 6, 8, 6. So he's averaging out at like 6 targets per game. at the end of last year. And of course, their quarterback situation was a poop sty. And now he's at least got Carson Wentz with this much shred of upside in him. But now they've added Jahan Dawson, and now Antonio Gibson is hopefully going to be healthy, and J.D. Mckissick is back. So that his targets didn't go anywhere. I mean, they're adding another mouth to feed in Jahan Dawson, who obviously they want because they drafted him at like 13th overall, or way higher than anyone was expecting him to go. So his already pretty bad workload that he was getting in the second half of last year, although in the first half he had 4 games with double-digit targets. I mean, after the bye week, I mean, he just averaged 6 targets per game, and that's I can't expect that to go up, especially having them adding a first-round wide receiver. So I'm not ready to bank on 9 targets per game and 6-7 touchdowns or something that would push him over into the top 20.
In terms, I say it like this: Mclaren caught 77 of his 130 targets, and I don't think his targets are going to go anywhere. I really don't think Dotson's taking it away. I think we're going to see a lot more efficiency from Carson Wentz, who played well for 15 weeks. All right, he did. People act like he didn't, but he played well for 15 weeks.
He played well for some of those 15 weeks, yeah.
Either way, Terry McLaurin caught 77 of his 130 passes. That is a horrific catch percentage, and that is not on him. Even the year before, he caught 87 of 134. It's just that the targets are so off base. I don't think people understand how bad Tyler Heineke is and how much of an upgrade Carson Wentz still is from that. So I think efficiency is just going to be better. I think there's more upside for touchdowns as opposed to he scored 5 last year. I think there's room to get to 6 or 7. That will help as well. I think that's a possibility. Pittman scored 6. I'm not totally out on Terry McLaurin in terms of his redraft value, but that we got all summer to debate that. I'll jump onto my wide receiver, my bust wide receiver, and it's a guy that I accidentally chose the wrong stat profile for because I was trying to choose the guy that played as recently as 2021, but he didn't.
I interrupt you with
Michael Thomas.
News.
Yeah, no, Cooper Kupp, I actually meant to, but you distracted me with how upsetting it was. Cooper Kupp has signed a 3-year extension for tying him to LA for the next 5 years at $110 million. He is now the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL.
So we won't do it now, but at some point we need to break down the 3-year extension that ties him to LA for the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's more or less meaning that Cooper Kupp is going to be both a Ram and that he's going to be very good because he's Cooper Kupp in a Sean McVay system. That is our fantasy analysis, that you can draft Cooper Kupp comfortably because he is not my bust wide receiver. Let me take away the banner for a second. Cooper Kupp will be good for fantasy. Do you have any other final thoughts on the Cooper Kupp side?
We say
the
it
cap
every
is
time,
fake, but the cap is fake. But the cap is not fake for Michael Thomas because Michael Thomas has been raking in money and has not provided anything for 2 years. He has not played since 2020, since that COVID-ridden season. So he now comes back 2 years later, is being drafted inside the top 24. Let's even say he's drafted inside the top 30. Let's say he drops comes draft day. Hasn't played football in 2 years. He has Chris Olave. He has Jarvis Landry in a low passing offense. I don't see how it works. I don't see how it works at all for Michael Thomas, a guy that has never really he's going to need touchdowns. He's going to need an immense amount of touchdowns. He's scored 9 every year of his career outside of his terrible 2020 year and 2017 when he scored 5. He scored 9 in 3 other years. And I just don't think James is that guy. He did it with Drew Brees. He taking 2 years off and then swapping from a Hall of Fame Drew Brees to Jameis Winston, who, is not even 100% right now either. He's not 100%. He's coming off his own injury. And then you add in target competition, which MT always commanded 150 targets. Like, he was a monster. So now you take what worked for him and you take it away, and then you add 2 years away from football. And I just don't see any world. He's the type of player, Riley. I think everyone has these type of players, and we realize that as the summer goes on. He is the player I'm willing to be wrong about. I will not have Michael Thomas on my teams. I wasn't willing to have him last year. He was a complete hands-off. I am willing to be wrong about Michael Thomas this year, of a guy who's taken 2 years off football, and the rarity that helps someone who now has competition and worse situation and loses his head coach. I don't see any world that I'm drafting him inside my top 30 wide receivers, probably not even my top 35.
That's the big thing that Sean Payton is no longer around. I mean, now Alvin Kamara is still going to command so many targets. I mean, whether or not you trust him with Jameis Winston is another story. You trust Alvin Kamara with Jameis Winston, that factors into whether or not you trust MT with Jameis Winston. And the whole Saints offense is trending downward. And at this point, I mean, it's impossible for me to trust someone who hasn't played a game in 2 years. I don't care where they're drafted. If Michael Thomas were being drafted as the wide receiver 45, I would still find a reason to take Allen Lazard over him.
Oh, geez. Yeah, that's honestly even like I might take the upside on Michael Thomas for the high ceiling that he does have, but I could totally see myself tilting the other way, and we'll see how my projections shake out for that. But I'm very hands off of Michael Thomas this year.
I'm with you. I think he's being drafted crazy high. Let's talk about tight ends. And every time we talk about tight ends on this show, we talk about, the lower end guys and try to predict breakouts. My bust tight end this year is going to be Darren Waller, who's being drafted as a tight end 5. He's still part of that second tier of tight ends. Let's look at his target share after week 1, when he had 19 targets for 10 receptions and 100 yards. 7, 7, 7, 8, 5, and then he had 11 after the bye week and 1 week of injury. 7, 8, 5, and then he missed the next 5 games with injury. Came back in week 18 to have 9 targets. And this was during the Hunter Renfrow breakout when he was commanding a bunch of targets. And now one of the biggest target commanders, monsters in the entire league has joined the Raiders, and Davonte Adams. And since, as we know, Derek Carr and Davonte Adams already have chemistry from when they played together at Fresno State. Obviously, that's very far removed, but that's a lot of the motivation that Davonte Adams was excited to join this team, was to play with Derek Carr. So Davonte Adams is going to get his and more. He's probably going to have, he's going to hit the 140 target mark that he seems to hit every week, and that's going to come out of Darren Waller's pocket. And when you're chasing the positional advantage that is a top-tier tight end like Darren Waller, I mean, maybe he could still finish as, the tight end 6 or 7, maybe 5. But based on what the tight ends around him are, maybe the tight end 5 finishes, as the 100th overall player in fantasy, when you could have had, if we're drafting Darren Waller in the 4th round, there's still a lot of good wide receivers who are going in that area. So I'm not ready to jump in on Darren Waller being the positional advantage that you'd want out of a top-tier tight end that you'd have to pay for.
Darren Waller is so interesting because the price is my issue. Obviously, the price you have to pay pretty highly. But I think when he's going in this tight end 5 spot, you're passing on the 2nd round, 3rd round guys, and you're probably getting Darren Waller in your 4th, 5th round if you wanted to. And that's interesting to me because the case with Darren Waller right now is that he scored 2 touchdowns last year. He scored 9 the year before. So regression has to be coming his way. But you add in the best red zone receiver in the NFL with Davonte Adams. You have one of the
best red zone receiver in Hunter Renfrow.
Yeah, he is honestly one of the best. He's amazing in short yard situations. He's very good at it. So will that regression come? And that regression might only be there if Derek Carr is going to put up MVP level numbers, where Derek Carr has to throw 35, 40 touchdowns, probably closer to 40 for Darren Waller to get his 6 touchdowns. Davonte Adams gets his 10, and Hunter Renfrow gets his 7, and then auxiliary pieces. He's gonna have to be up there, and I don't know. Derek Carr's never been that guy. And it's so risk reward, which that mid round tight end can be, because Darren Waller is still a very good player who will be running routes on every single play. I share the apprehension. I do get it, and I realize I never switched to Riley's bust tight end there on the banner. I do apologize, but what I know for sure is that I support your decision on that, Riley. I do. I can understand the hesitation, but I'll move on to my tight end, which is in Miami. I have been a known Mckissick hater for quite some time, and I'll toss it down here because I think Mckissick is going to be a riser over this summer. I think people are going to make the very simple connection of, San Fran system, George Kittle, and that's, I think, all the connection that people are going to make. And then they're going to look at his touchdowns. They're going to look at him and say, hey, he scored 2 touchdowns last year. That's got to go up. Plus, the offense gets better. And only one of those things is really true. Because I don't think the touchdowns are a lock to totally jump. They will go up from 2, but I think they could be 4. And that's not going to move the needle much for me for a guy that's not going to see enough targets to be relevant. Now, yes, Gesicki does have the athleticism to make the most of his catches, but he saw a career high in targets last year. Career high at 112. He got 73 of them. It didn't really matter too much to your fantasy team. You can play him some weeks, but it didn't really matter because Mike Gesicki still finished outside the top 5. He still wasn't there. There is no ceiling for Mike Gesicki, and therefore I'm never going to draft him. If he's always going to finish at the tight end 7, 8, 9, and now you add Tyreek Hill taking in 130 targets, plus whatever Jalen Waddle takes in his second year, plus you add Cedric Wilson, I don't see where, and I still don't project this team to be super pass happy. I don't think they're going to ask Tua to do all that. So where does Mike Gesicki get his? I don't see it. I don't see the route for a top 5 finish, and therefore I have zero interest in Mike Gesicki. He's currently going at tight end 12. I think he finishes tight end 10, 11, 12, but that player won't be helping your team. He won't be. So he won't be on any of my rosters. I don't see the ceiling, and therefore I'm not going to take the shot.
For you to take Mike Gesicki in a redraft league, I mean, as you could say about a lot of other tight ends in that range, you're passing up. Though that's the territory you could get a Matthew Stafford type quarterback, or you can get Chase Edmonds type, kind of zero RB type running back, and it's just not the tier that you want to target. And everything you said about him is true. That even though I do trust in this offense to get a lot better, I think every touchdown that came to town with the new additions that they've made, like Tyreek Hill and who's the tackle that they added? Was it Arik Armstead?
No, Teron Armstead. Arik Armstead is a defensive tackle.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Arik Armstead.
That's a good one.
Yes, that came with Teron Armstead and then their offensive line getting better. I think that's all going to Tyreek Hill. He's going to command all of that, and I think he'll still finish as a top 6 wide receiver. And Mike Gesicki will finish just about where he was last year, a 2-touchdown guy who you hate.
Yeah, I can never speak to the hate part of it, but that will be our show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of From College to Combine. I want to, again, remind everyone, follow us. Follow IDP Guys at IDP Guys on Twitter. Follow the For Frequency's Sake at FFSQC on Twitter. Follow me at Michael__Sicoli. And obviously, I guess if you really want to, you can follow Riley at Riley_Millette. We all are putting out some really great stuff, especially over at the website. Check out IDP Guys. Hit the subscriber button for all these sites, because ultimately, why not? Costs nothing for you, means everything to us, and you get better content for it. You're about to drop the mic. Let's just head out with it. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.